She was supposed to be his wife. Instead, Pamela Conant became a ghost, homeless, forgotten, her mind shattered by trauma so severe she can't remember the man who's been searching for her for 7 years. When billionaire Robert Traylor finds her teaching his daughter on his front lawn, wearing rags and staring at him like a complete stranger, he realizes something horrifying. The woman he loved didn't just disappear. She was destroyed. And the moment she starts remembering what happened, the depression, the loss, the reason she walked away, both of them will have to face a truth more painful than either can bear. Welcome back, my beautiful souls, to Mr. Crown Stories. If no one told you today, let me be the first. Your heart is stronger than you know. You have survived storms that would have broken others. I create these stories for people like you, people who know what it means to lose, to fall, to fight your way back to hope. If this story speaks to you, click subscribe, leave a comment saying, "I believe in second chances," and tell me where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I have another story that will touch your soul, and you don't want to miss it. Every word I write is for you, the one who faced darkness and chose to keep going. May today bring you closer to peace, may your burdens grow lighter, and may your heart remember what it feels like to hope again. Let's walk this journey together, hand in hand, heart to heart. Now, let the story begin. Should I know you? Pamela Conant wasn't always invisible. She wasn't always the woman people crossed the street to avoid. There was a time, years ago in a different lifetime, when she walked through college hallways with textbooks under her arm and dreams bigger than the sky. She wanted to teach. She wanted to write children's books with happy endings. She wanted to fall in love, build a home, and fill it with laughter. She got one of those things. She fell in love. But the rest? Life had other plans. Now, Pamela sleeps under an old concrete footbridge in downtown Philadelphia, the kind of place where the city's forgotten gather when the world has turned its back. Her blanket is a ripped gray sweater that smells like rain and regret. Her pillow is a crumpled pile of newspapers she collects not to read, but to shield herself from the cold concrete. At night, she hears the hum of traffic overhead, the rush of commuters heading home to warm houses, to families waiting, to lives that continued while hers stopped. She doesn't have that. She hasn't for years. Every morning, she wakes before dawn, not because she wants to, but because survival demands it. She washes her face with water from a public fountain near City Hall. She combs her tangled hair with her fingers. She straightens her torn coat, the same one she's worn through 3 winters, and she walks. Not to beg. She hates begging. She walks to remind herself that she still exists, that somewhere beneath the layers of grime and exhaustion, the woman she used to be is still there. Her daily route takes her past Westmont Estate, the largest, most magnificent property in the wealthy suburbs outside the city. Towering iron gates. Perfectly trimmed hedges. Security guards in crisp uniforms who never look her in the eye. Behind those gates lives a world she'll never touch, a world of housekeepers and private tutors, of catered meals and heated pools, of people who've never had to choose between eating and staying warm. But there's a small park across from the estate. A patch of grass with a single oak tree that provides just enough shade. That's where Pamela goes. Not to beg. Not to cause trouble. Just to sit. To breathe. To open whatever tattered book she managed to find in a library donation box and lose herself in someone else's story, because her own is too painful to remember. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September when she first noticed the little girl. Pamela had been sitting beneath the oak tree, squinting at a water-damaged copy of The Secret Garden, when she heard it, soft, hiccuping sobs. She looked up. A little girl sat alone on the grass about 20 feet away. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Blonde curls pulled back with a velvet ribbon. A pale blue dress that probably cost more than Pamela had seen in her entire life. Patent leather Mary Janes that gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. Everything about her screamed privilege. But privilege doesn't protect you from loneliness. The girl clutched a hardcover book in her lap, her small shoulders shaking as tears streamed down her flushed cheeks. Pamela watched for a moment, debating. People like her, homeless, dirty, desperate, weren't supposed to approach children. She knew that. She'd been shouted at before, threatened, even chased away by parents who saw her as a danger rather than a person. But the little girl looked so heartbroken. Pamela stood slowly, brushing dirt from her worn jeans. She approached cautiously, the way you might approach a wounded animal, gently, carefully, ready to retreat if necessary. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Pamela's voice came out softer than she expected, rusty from disuse. The girl looked up, startled. Her blue eyes were rimmed with red, her cheeks streaked with tears. For a moment, Pamela thought she would scream, run, call for help. But she didn't. I can't read this part," the girl whispered, sniffling. "The words are too hard. My tutors talk too fast. They get frustrated when I don't understand. And Daddy's always at the office." Pamela's heart cracked open. She knew that feeling, the loneliness of being surrounded by people but still utterly alone. "May I help?" Pamela asked, kneeling beside her on the grass. The girl hesitated, studying Pamela's face. Then she nodded. Pamela sat down, and for the first time in years, she felt something she thought had died long ago: purpose. She opened the book and began to read aloud, her voice steady and warm. She sounded out the difficult words slowly, patiently, without judgment. She pointed to illustrations. She asked gentle questions. And slowly, the girl's tears stopped. Her breathing steadied. She leaned closer, her eyes brightening with each sentence. "What's your name?" Pamela asked when they reached the end of the chapter. "Francis," the girl whispered. "My daddy says I'm smart, but I don't feel smart." Pamela smiled, a real smile, one she hadn't felt on her face in so long it almost hurt. "You are smart, Francis. You just need someone who listens." Francis looked up at her with wonder, as if no one had ever said anything like that to her before. That was how it began. A fragile, impossible friendship between a forgotten woman and a billionaire's daughter. For 2 weeks, Francis slipped away from her afternoon lessons. She'd walk across the manicured lawn to the park where Pamela waited beneath the oak tree. Pamela taught her how to sound out words, how to follow the rhythm of a sentence, how to fall in love with stories. Francis laughed. She asked questions. She stopped crying over her books. The security guards noticed, of course. But Francis always waved them off with the confidence only a child raised behind golden gates could have. "It's okay," she'd say brightly. "Daddy won't mind." But Francis was wrong. Because one Tuesday afternoon, Robert Traylor, CEO of Traylor Industries, one of the wealthiest men on the East Coast, a man who hadn't left the office before sunset in months, walked across his front lawn carrying a leather briefcase and froze. On his grass. His perfectly manicured, impossibly expensive grass. A homeless woman sat cross-legged, reading to his daughter. And when she looked up, when their eyes met for the first time in 7 years, Robert's entire world shattered. Because that homeless woman wasn't a stranger. She was Pamela Conant. The woman he loved. The woman he lost. The woman he never stopped searching for. Robert stood frozen on his front lawn, briefcase gripping his hand so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His heart hammered against his ribs like a prisoner desperate to escape. The woman sitting cross-legged on his grass, teaching his daughter, her voice soft and patient, looked up at him with hollow, confused eyes. Pamela. Pamela. 7 years. 7 years he'd searched. 7 years he'd hired investigators, called hospitals, driven through neighborhoods he had no business being in, all looking for her. 7 years of guilt that ate at him like acid, wondering if she was alive, if she was safe, if she remembered him. And now she was here. On his lawn. In rags. Teaching his daughter. "Francis," he managed to choke out, his voice cracking. "Come inside. Now." Francis looked up at him with wide, startled eyes. She'd never heard her father sound like that. Panicked, broken, desperate. "But Daddy, this is my friend." "Inside. Please." His voice softened, but his eyes never left Pamela's face. Pamela stood slowly, brushing grass from her worn jeans. She looked at Robert the way you'd look at any stranger, polite, distant, apologetic. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean any harm." She was crying. "I just wanted to help." Robert's throat closed. She didn't know him. She truly didn't recognize him. "What's your name?" he asked, even though he already knew. "Pamela," she said quietly. "Pamela Conant." Hearing her say it, her own name, in that voice he used to hear whisper his name in the dark, nearly brought him to his knees. "Go," he said, his voice barely audible. "Please. Just go." Pamela nodded, grabbed her tattered backpack, and walked away without looking back. Francis burst into tears. That night, Robert couldn't sleep. He paced his study, whiskey glass untouched on his desk, mind racing through 1,000 memories. He told Francis that the woman was dangerous, that she couldn't see her again. But Francis had screamed at him, actually screamed, something she'd never done before. "She's not dangerous. She's kind. She listens to me. You don't." The words had cut deeper than any business rival ever could. By morning, Robert had made a decision. He would keep his distance. He would have security monitor the area. But if Francis wanted to see Pamela again, he wouldn't stop her. He couldn't explain why. Maybe because deep down, he knew Pamela wasn't dangerous. Maybe because he was terrified that if he scared her away completely, he'd lose her again forever. Or maybe, just maybe, he wanted to see her again too. The next afternoon, Frances slipped out of her piano lesson the moment her instructor's back was turned. She ran across the lawn, past the rose gardens, straight to the oak tree in the park. Pamela was there, sitting in the same spot, reading the same worn copy of The Secret Garden. "You came back." Frances cried, throwing her arms around Pamela's neck. Pamela stiffened, surprised. Then slowly, carefully, she hugged the little girl back. "I wasn't sure I should," Pamela admitted. "Your father seemed upset." "He's always upset," Frances said, pulling back and plopping down beside her. "He works all the time. But you make me feel smart. You make me feel like I matter." Pamela's chest tightened. "You do matter, Frances. You matter so much. Will you teach me again?" Pamela glanced toward the mansion. She could see a security guard standing near the gate, watching them. But he didn't approach. He didn't call for backup. He just watched. "Okay," Pamela whispered. "But just for a little while." That little while turned into an hour. Then 2. Then every single day. By the end of the first week, Frances had stopped crying over her books. She'd started raising her hand in her homeschool sessions. Her tutors noticed. Her father noticed. But what they didn't know was that every afternoon, after lessons, Frances would slip away to the park. And Pamela would be there, waiting beneath the oak tree with patience and warmth and a kind of love Frances had never felt from anyone else. "Sound it out," Pamela would say gently when Frances stumbled over a word. "You're not stupid. You just need time." "My tutors don't say that," Frances muttered one afternoon. "They act like I should already know everything." Pamela smiled sadly. "Some people forget what it's like to be a beginner. But you're doing beautifully, Frances. You really are." Frances beamed. "You're better than all my teachers." Pamela felt something crack open inside her chest, something warm and alive and terrifying. She hadn't felt needed in so long. She hadn't felt seen. And now this little girl, this lonely, brilliant, overlooked little girl, looked at her like she was the most important person in the world. "Thank you," Pamela whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The security guards noticed, of course. They reported back to Robert every day. "She's still meeting with your daughter, sir. Should we intervene?" Robert would stand at his office window, watching from a distance. He'd see Frances laughing. He'd see Pamela smiling, really smiling, the kind of smile he remembered from college when she'd read him poetry in the library. "No," he'd say quietly. "Let them be." "But sir." "I said let them be." One afternoon, the head of security approached Pamela directly. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to leave the premises." Frances jumped up, fury blazing in her little face. "No. She's my friend." "Miss Frances, your father." "My father said it's okay." Francis lied confidently. He knows she's here. He doesn't mind. Ask him. The guard hesitated. He hadn't actually received orders to remove her. Just to monitor. So he stepped back. It's okay, Francis said brightly, turning back to Pamela. Daddy won't mind. But Francis was wrong. As the days passed, something strange began happening to Pamela. Flashes. At first, they were subtle. A scent, cologne, sharp and expensive, that made her chest tighten. A laugh from somewhere across the street that sounded familiar. The way the afternoon light hit the windows of the mansion reminded her of something. Someone. One evening, as she lay beneath the bridge, she closed her eyes and saw a face. A man. Young. Handsome. Smiling at her across a library table. You're going to change the world, Pam. She jolted awake, heart racing. Who was that? Where had that memory come from? She tried to hold on to it, but it slipped away like water through her fingers. The next day, when Frances talked about her father, Daddy's company is called Trailer Industries. He builds things. Big things. He's really important. Pamela felt a strange shiver run down her spine. Trailer. That name. Why did that name feel like a ghost brushing against her skin? What's your daddy's first name? Pamela asked casually. Robert, Frances said, already focused on her book. Robert Trailer. Pamela's hands trembled. She didn't know why. She didn't know this man. But somewhere deep inside, buried beneath years of trauma and loss and survival, something whispered, yes, you do. She shook it off. She had to. Thinking too hard about the past only brought pain. It was a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after they'd first met, when Frances said the words that would change everything. They were lying on the grass, looking up at the clouds. Pamela had just finished reading a chapter about a girl who'd lost her mother, and Frances had gone very quiet. Pamela, she whispered. Yes, sweetheart. Frances rolled onto her side, looking at Pamela with those big, sad blue eyes. I wish you were my mommy. Pamela's breath caught. Her eyes filled with tears she couldn't explain. Oh, Frances. I mean it, Frances said, her voice trembling. You make me feel safe. You make me feel like I'm enough. Mommy's gone, she left when I was little, and Daddy tries, but he's always working. But you're different. Pamela reached out and brushed a curl from Frances's face, her hand shaking. You deserve someone wonderful, Frances. Someone who can give you everything. Frances grabbed her hand. I don't want everything. I just want you. Pamela pulled the little girl into her arms, holding her tight as tears streamed silently down her face. She didn't see the man standing at the upstairs window of the mansion, watching them with a hand pressed against the glass and tears in his eyes. Robert Trailer was watching. And his heart was breaking all over again. Robert Trailer prided himself on control. In boardrooms filled with sharks, he never flinched. When competitors tried to crush him, he crushed them back. When investors doubted him, he proved them wrong with numbers that didn't lie. Control was his currency. Control was how he'd built an empire from nothing. But watching a homeless woman hold his daughter through the window of his study, watching Pamela, his Pamela, cradle Frances like she was the most precious thing in the world, Robert's control shattered like glass. He'd been standing there for 20 minutes frozen, unable to look away. Frances had said those words, I wish you were my mommy, and Pamela had pulled her close with a tenderness that made Robert's chest cave in. That should have been their daughter. That should have been their life. If he hadn't been so ambitious, so stupid, so sure he had time. His assistant knocked on the door. Mr. Trailer? The Singapore call is ready. Cancel it, Robert said without turning around. Sir. Cancel everything. Clear my schedule. I'm going home. His assistant blinked in shock. Robert Trailer never went home early. He once worked through a broken rib. He'd taken calls from hospital beds. Leaving the office at 3 p.m. on a Thursday? Unheard of. But Robert was already grabbing his briefcase, his car keys, his coat. His hands shook as he walked to the elevator. His driver tried to make small talk on the way home, but Robert didn't hear a single word. His mind was spinning, crashing, drowning in memories he'd spent 7 years trying to bury. Pamela laughing in the rain outside their favorite coffee shop. Pamela reading him poetry she'd written on napkins. Pamela kissing him goodbye the night he left for London, whispering, "Come back to me. Promise you'll come back." And he had. He'd come back 3 months later with a ring in his pocket and a plan for their future. But she was gone. Her apartment, empty. Her phone, disconnected. Her friends, confused, worried, then eventually, forgetful. Life moved on. Everyone moved on. Everyone except Robert. The car pulled through the gates of Westmont Estate at 3:47 p.m. Robert stepped out, and the afternoon sun hit him like a spotlight. He walked toward the house, briefcase in hand, mind racing with what he'd say, how he'd explain, whether she'd even. He stopped. On his lawn, his perfectly trimmed, obscenely expensive lawn, Pamela sat cross-legged in the grass, a battered book in her lap. Francis sat beside her, head resting on Pamela's shoulder, completely absorbed in whatever story they were reading together. Robert's heart slammed against his ribs. He'd watched from the window. He'd seen the security footage. But seeing her up close, in broad daylight, real and solid, and there, it was different. Her hair, once soft and shining, hung in tangled knots. Her clothes were torn, stained, held together with hope and determination. Her hands, the hands that used to cup his face, that used to write poetry in journals she'd filled cover to cover, were cracked and dirty. But her voice. God, her voice was the same. Soft. Patient. Full of a warmth that made the world feel safer. Something inside Robert snapped. "Francis!" he shouted, louder than he meant to. "Step away from her." Both heads whipped toward him. Francis's eyes went wide. Pamela's face drained of color. Robert marched across the lawn, panic and fury and grief tangling into something he couldn't name. He wasn't angry at Pamela. He was angry at the universe, at fate, at himself for not finding her sooner. "Francis, get in the house. Now. Daddy." "Now, Francis." Francis jumped to her feet, tears already forming. "You don't understand. She's not." "I said get inside." Pamela stood slowly, clutching her backpack like a shield. She looked at Robert the way you'd look at any angry stranger, wary, apologetic, small. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, voice shaking. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. She was upset, and I just wanted to help. I'll go. I won't come back." She turned to leave. "Wait." The word came out strangled. Robert stepped closer, and Pamela froze. He was 3 feet away now. Close enough to see the freckles on her nose that used to disappear under his kisses. Close enough to see the scar on her chin from when she'd fallen off her bike in college. Close enough to see that her eyes, those beautiful, devastating eyes, were looking at him with absolutely no recognition. "Pamela," he whispered, his voice breaking on her name. She blinked, confused. "How do you know my name?" Francis stepped between them, her small hands balled into fists. "Daddy, don't yell at her. She's my friend. She helps me read. She's not dangerous." Robert barely heard his daughter. His entire world had narrowed to the woman standing in front of him, staring at him like he was a stranger. "Pamela," he said again, stepping closer. "It's me. It's Robert." Pamela's brow furrowed. She studied his face, really looked at him, searching for something she couldn't find. I'm sorry," she said softly. "Should I know you?" The ground tilted beneath Robert's feet. Should I know you? He'd searched for her for years. He dreamed of this moment, finding her, holding her, telling her everything he should have said before he left. He'd imagined 1,000 reunions. None of them looked like this. "Pamela, we..." His voice cracked. He tried again. "We were together. In college. We were going to..." He couldn't finish. His throat closed around the words. Pamela shook her head slowly, her eyes filling with something that looked like pity. I'm sorry. I don't remember college very well. There was an accident. My mother died. I lost a lot of time after that. I know about your mother, Robert said desperately. I was there. I held you at the funeral. I don't remember you, Pamela said, and the kindness in her voice was worse than any cruelty. I'm sorry. I really am. But I don't know you. Robert stumbled backward like he'd been shot. Francis grabbed Pamela's hand. Don't listen to him. He's just scared because he doesn't understand. Francis, go inside, Robert said, but his voice was hollow now. Defeated. No. Pamela is good. She makes me happy. Why are you being mean? I'm not, Robert's voice broke. He looked at Pamela, really looked at her, and saw the truth written all over her face. She didn't remember him. 7 years. 7 years of searching, of hoping, of carrying her memory like a weight he couldn't put down. And she had forgotten him completely. How long? Robert asked quietly. How long have you been like this? Pamela looked down at her torn clothes, her dirty hands. Shame flickered across her face. A few years. I'm not sure exactly. Time gets confusing. Where do you sleep? Under the bridge downtown. Near the old train station. Robert felt like someone had reached into his chest and ripped his heart out with bare hands. You've been sleeping on the streets, he said, not a question. A horror. Pamela nodded. For years. Another nod. And I didn't find you. Francis tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, you're scaring her. Stop. But Robert couldn't stop. He stepped closer, and Pamela instinctively stepped back. Pamela, please. Look at me. Really look at me. She did. And for just a second, one brief, agonizing second, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition? Memory? Hope. Then it was gone. I'm sorry, she whispered again. I wish I could remember. But I don't. Robert's knees nearly buckled. He grabbed the back of a lawn chair to steady himself. Francis was crying now. Daddy, please don't make her leave. Please. Robert looked at his daughter, his beautiful, lonely daughter who'd found comfort in the arms of a woman who used to be his entire world. Then he looked at Pamela, standing there like a ghost made flesh, real but unreachable. Go, he said hoarsely. Just go. Pamela nodded, grabbed her backpack, and walked away. Francis screamed after her. Pamela. Wait. Don't go. But Pamela kept walking, head down, shoulders hunched, disappearing down the street like smoke. Robert collapsed onto the grass, right there in the middle of his perfect lawn, and buried his face in his hands. Francis knelt beside him, pounding her small fists against his back. You ruined everything. She was the only one who cared. Robert couldn't respond. He couldn't move. All he could do was sit there, trembling, as the truth crashed over him like a wave. She doesn't remember me. The woman he loved. The woman he searched for. The woman he never stopped hoping for. She doesn't remember me. Robert sat on the grass for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. His expensive suit was stained with dirt. His hands trembled. Francis had finally stopped hitting him and now sat beside him, crying quietly into her knees. I hate you, she whispered. Robert didn't argue. Right now, he hated himself too. But as the shock began to fade, something else took its place. Not anger. Not despair. Fear. Pure, terrifying fear. Pamela was alive. She was here. But she was also broken, homeless, sleeping under a bridge in one of the most dangerous parts of the city. And she had no memory of him, no memory of the life they'd almost built together, no memory of the promises they'd made. Which meant she had no reason to trust him. No reason to let him help. Robert pushed himself to his feet. His legs felt unsteady, but his mind was clearing. He looked down at Francis. Stay here, he said quietly. Where are you going? To fix this. Before Francis could respond, Robert was jogging across the lawn, out through the front gates, down the sidewalk where Pamela had disappeared moments before. He found her 3 blocks away, walking slowly with her head down, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile than she'd seemed sitting with Francis. "Pamela," he called out. She stopped but didn't turn around. Robert slowed as he approached, his heart hammering. He didn't want to scare her. He didn't want her to run. "Please," he said, coming around to face her. "Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Pamela looked up at him with tired eyes. "Your daughter is lovely. But I think it's best if I don't come back." "I know. I understand. But I need to ask you something first." She hesitated, then nodded. Robert took a breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "How long have you been with Frances? Meeting her, I mean." "About 2 weeks," Pamela said quietly. She was crying over a book. "I just wanted to help." "Did she pay you?" "No. I didn't ask for anything." "Then why did you keep coming back?" Pamela's eyes softened. For the first time since he'd confronted her on the lawn, she looked almost peaceful. "Because she made me feel useful," she whispered. "Like I still mattered. Like maybe I wasn't as broken as everyone thinks I am." Robert's throat tightened. "You're not broken. You don't know me." "I do," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I know you better than anyone. And you're not broken, Pamela. You're hurt. There's a difference." Pamela studied his face, confusion flickering in her eyes. "You keep saying my name like you know me. But I don't. I can't." "I know," Robert said gently. "I know you don't remember. And I'm not going to force you to. But please, let me ask you this. Where are you sleeping tonight?" Pamela looked away. "That's not your concern." "Under the bridge downtown. Near the old train station. You told me already." She flinched. "I shouldn't have said that." Robert stepped closer, and this time she didn't step back. He could see the exhaustion etched into her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the hollow of her cheeks, the way her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the straps of her backpack. She was surviving. But barely. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you been on the streets?" Pamela shook her head. "I don't know. 3 years? 4? I lost count." Robert felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. 4 years. For years she'd been sleeping on concrete. For years she'd been cold, hungry, alone. For years while he'd been building his empire, living in a mansion, eating gourmet meals prepared by private chefs. 4 years. "Do you have family?" he asked desperately. "Anyone who could?" "No," Pamela said flatly. "My mother died. I don't have anyone else." "Friends." She laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "People like me don't have friends. We have survival. That's it." Robert's vision blurred. He blinked hard, trying to keep himself together. But all he could see was her, the Pamela he'd known, the Pamela who used to light up every room she walked into. The memory hit him like a freight train. They were sitting in the college library at 2 a.m., surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups. Pamela had been trying to study for a history exam, but Robert kept making her laugh. "Stop," she giggled, swatting his arm. "I'm going to fail because of you." "You've never failed anything in your life," Robert had said, leaning back in his chair. "There's a first time for everything." "Not for you. You're too smart. Too determined. Too—" He'd trailed off, just looking at her. She'd looked back, her smile softening. "Too what?" "Too perfect," he'd whispered. She'd rolled her eyes. "I'm not perfect, Robert." "You are to me." She'd leaned across the table and kissed him, soft and sweet, and whispered against his lips, "Then I guess you're stuck with me." "Forever?" he'd asked. "Forever," she'd promised. Another memory. This one sharper, more painful. They were walking through Central Park, hand in hand, dreaming out loud about the future. "I want to teach," Pamela had said, her eyes bright with hope. "Elementary school, maybe. Kindergarten. I want to be the teacher who makes kids feel safe." "You will be," Robert had said. "You'll be amazing. And you'll be a CEO," she teased. "Building skyscrapers and changing the world. Only if you're with me." She'd stopped walking and turned to face him. "I'll always be with you, Robert. You know that, right?" "I know," he'd said. And he'd believed it. More memories, flooding faster now. Pamela writing poems on napkins at their favorite diner, reading them to him while he pretended to be embarrassed but secretly loved every word. Pamela dancing in his tiny apartment while he cooked dinner, twirling in one of his oversized shirts, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. Pamela crying in his arms the night her mother died, her whole body shaking, whispering, "I don't know how to do this without her." "You don't have to do it alone," he'd said. "I'm here. I'm always going to be here." And then the worst memory of all. The night he left for London. "It's only 3 months," he'd said, holding her close on the front steps of her apartment. 12 weeks. I'll be back before you know it." "Promise," she'd whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I promise. And when I come back." He'd pulled the small velvet box from his pocket and shown it to her, not opening it, just letting her see it. "When I come back, I'm going to ask you a very important question." Her eyes had gone wide. "Robert." 12 weeks, Pam. "Just wait for me." "I'll wait forever if I have to," she'd said, kissing him one last time. He'd left believing her. Believing in them. And when he came back, ring in his pocket, speech rehearsed, heart full of hope, she was gone. Her apartment was empty. Locks changed. Neighbors said she'd moved out weeks ago. Her phone was disconnected. Her email bounced back. He'd called hospitals, police stations, shelters. He'd hired investigators. He'd driven through every rough neighborhood in the city, searching faces in crowds, hoping to see her. Nothing. Everyone told him to move on. Let her go. Maybe she'd left because she wanted to. Maybe she'd found someone else. But Robert had never believed that. He'd searched for 2 years before the investigators finally told him there was nothing more they could do. "She's either dead or she doesn't want to be found," they'd said. Neither option had brought him peace. Robert blinked, and he was back on the sidewalk. Pamela was still standing in front of him, watching him with concern. "Are you okay?" she asked. He almost laughed. Was he okay? The woman he loved, the woman he'd searched for, grieved for, dreamed about, was standing right in front of him, wearing torn clothes and looking at him like he was a stranger. "No," he said honestly. "I'm not okay." Pamela shifted uncomfortably. "I should go." "Wait." Robert reached out but stopped himself before touching her. "Please. Just, let me help you. A hotel room for the night. A hot meal. Something. Anything. I don't need charity." "It's not charity," Robert said, his voice breaking. It's me trying to do the one thing I should have done 7 years ago." "Which is?" "Protect you." Pamela stared at him, her eyes searching his face for something she couldn't name. Then she shook her head. "I don't know you," she said softly. "You seem like a good man. But I can't accept help from strangers." "I'm not a stranger, Pamela. I'm—" But she was already walking away. Robert stood there, frozen, watching her disappear around the corner. Then he turned and walked back to his mansion. Back to his daughter. Back to his empty, perfect life. Frances was still sitting on the lawn. "Did you find her?" she asked. Robert nodded. "Did you fix it?" Robert sank down beside her and, for the first time in 7 years, allowed himself to break. Tears poured down his face. His shoulders shook. And Frances, confused and frightened, threw her arms around him. "Daddy." "I lost her, Frances," he choked out. "I lost her once, and I found her, but she doesn't remember me." She doesn't remember us. And I don't know how to fix that. He cried until he couldn't breathe. Cried for the years he'd lost. Cried for the woman she used to be. Cried for the life they should have had. And when the tears finally stopped, he looked up at the sky and made a vow. I don't care what it takes, he whispered. I don't care how long it takes or what I have to do. I'm going to save her. Francis squeezed his hand. Promise. Robert squeezed back. Promise. Robert didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, staring at his phone, debating whether to call someone, a friend, a therapist, anyone who could tell him he wasn't losing his mind. But who could understand this? Who could understand finding the love of your life homeless and broken, with no memory of the future you'd planned together? By 6 a.m., he'd made a decision. He dressed simply, jeans, a sweater, nothing that screamed billionaire. He stopped by the kitchen and filled a bag with food, sandwiches, fruit, bottled water, a thermos of hot coffee. Then he drove downtown to the old train station. The area was worse than he'd imagined. Broken glass littered the sidewalks. Graffiti covered every surface. Makeshift tents huddled under the bridge, and the smell of urine and decay hung heavy in the cold morning air. Robert felt sick. This was where she slept. This was where Pamela, brilliant, kind, beautiful Pamela, had been surviving. He found her sitting against a concrete pillar, wrapped in her torn sweater, reading a water-stained paperback by the dim morning light. She looked up when his shadow fell across her page. You, she said, not unkindly. Just tired. Me, Robert replied. He held up the bag. I brought breakfast. Pamela looked at the bag, then back at him. I told you. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's breakfast. There's a difference. Not to me. Robert knelt down beside her, setting the bag on the ground between them. Please. Just eat something. Then I'll leave if you want me to. Pamela stared at him for a long moment. Then her stomach betrayed her, a loud, embarrassing growl that made her cheeks flush. Fine, she muttered. But then you go. Robert nodded and sat down against the pillar beside her. He watched as she opened the bag and pulled out a sandwich. She ate slowly, carefully, like she was afraid it might disappear if she moved too fast. When's the last time you ate? Robert asked quietly. Yesterday morning. Someone threw half a bagel in the trash near the coffee shop on 5th. It was still good. Robert's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to scream. He wanted to grab her and drag her to his house and lock her in a guest room where she'd be safe and warm and fed. But he knew that would only scare her away. Pamela, he said carefully. I want to help you. Really help you. Not just with food. With everything. She stopped chewing. Why? Because you deserve better than this. You don't know me. I do, Robert said, his voice cracking. I know you better than you know yourself right now. And I know you don't belong here. Pamela set the sandwich down. People like me don't belong anywhere. That's not true. Isn't it? She looked at him with hollow eyes. I'm homeless. I'm dirty. I have no family, no job, no future. People cross the street to avoid me. They spit near my feet. They call me trash. So where exactly do I belong, Robert? Hearing her say his name, even in anger, sent a jolt through his chest. With me, he wanted to say. You belong with me. But he couldn't. Not yet. Let me take you to a doctor, he said instead. Just to make sure you're okay. Please. No. Pamela's voice turned sharp. No doctors. No hospitals. No institutions. Why not? Because that's where they take people like me and lock them up and forget about them. I've seen it happen. I won't let that happen to you. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. Pamela shook her head and went back to her sandwich, clearly done with the conversation. Robert was about to leave when he heard footsteps behind him. Pamela. He turned to see Frances running toward them, still in her pajamas and slippers, her blonde hair flying behind her. One of the security guards jogged after her, looking panicked. "Miss Francis. You can't just—" "Pamela." Francis threw herself at Pamela, wrapping her arms around her neck. "You came back." "Francis, what are you doing here?" Robert asked. "I followed you," Francis said, not letting go of Pamela. "I knew you'd come see her." Pamela hugged Francis back, and Robert saw tears welling in her eyes. "You shouldn't be here, sweetheart," Pamela whispered. "This place isn't safe for little girls." "I don't care," Francis said fiercely. "I'm not leaving without you." "Francis." "Please, Pamela. Please come home with us. Just for a little while. You don't have to stay forever. Just don't stay here." Pamela looked at Robert, her expression torn between hope and fear. "I don't belong in your world," she said quietly. "You belong with me," Francis said, squeezing tighter. "Please. I need you." And those 4 words from a 7-year-old girl, broke something inside Pamela. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." 3 hours later, Pamela sat in a private medical office in downtown Philadelphia, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. Robert sat beside her. Francis sat on her other side, holding her hand. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Hernandez, spoke gently as she reviewed Pamela's initial examination. "You're malnourished, dehydrated, and exhausted. But physically, you're going to be fine with rest and proper nutrition. What concerns me more is your mental health. You've mentioned memory loss." Pamela nodded. "I remember pieces. But big chunks are just gone. That's not uncommon with severe trauma. Your mind is protecting you from things it doesn't think you're ready to face yet. But with time and therapy, those memories can return." Dr. Hernandez paused. "I'd like to do a psychological evaluation. Just to get a baseline. Is that okay?" Pamela looked at Robert. He nodded encouragingly. "Okay," she whispered. Dr. Hernandez began asking questions. Simple ones at first: her name, her age, where she grew up. Then harder ones: what happened to her mother, when she became homeless, whether she'd ever sought help before. Pamela answered robotically, her voice flat and distant. But then Dr. Hernandez asked something different. "Do you remember being in love?" Pamela froze. "What?" "Being in love," Dr. Hernandez repeated gently. "Before everything fell apart. Do you remember loving someone?" Pamela opened her mouth to say no. But then, a flash. A library. Late at night. A young man sitting across from her, smiling like she'd hung the moon. "You're too smart. Too determined. Too perfect." "I'm not perfect, Robert." "You are to me." Pamela gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Pamela." Robert leaned forward, concerned. "What is it?" I saw something. Someone." She looked at him, her eyes wide and confused. I saw you. In a library." Robert's heart stopped. "You remember?" "I don't know. Maybe. It's fuzzy, but—" She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold onto the image. "You were younger. We were studying. You kept making me laugh." "That's right," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "We studied together all the time. You always said I was distracting you." Another flash. Walking through a park, hand in hand. "I want to teach. I want to be the teacher who makes kids feel safe." "You will be. You'll be amazing. And you'll be a CEO." Pamela's breathing quickened. A park. We were walking in a park. I was talking about teaching. "Central Park," Robert confirmed, moving closer. "You said you wanted to teach kindergarten." More flashes, coming faster now. Writing on napkins at a diner. Dancing in a tiny apartment. Crying in someone's arms. "I don't know how to do this without her." "You don't have to do it alone. I'm here. I'm always going to be here." My mother, Pamela choked out. She died. And you held me. You promised you wouldn't leave. Robert grabbed her hands. That's right. I was there. I held you all night. But then you left. Pamela's eyes snapped open, suddenly sharp with pain. You left. You went somewhere. London? You said 3 months. 12 weeks, Robert whispered. I said 12 weeks. You showed me something. A box. You said when you came back. Her voice broke. You were going to ask me something important. Tears streamed down Robert's face. I was going to propose. I had a ring. I was going to ask you to marry me. Pamela stared at him, her whole body trembling. Another flash. This one darker. Writing a letter. Crying. Crossing out words. Starting over. Dear Robert, I can't do this anymore. The depression is too heavy. I'm drowning. I can't breathe. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I'm scared all the time. And I'm terrified that if you come back and see me like this, you'll realize I'm not worth loving. The letter, crumpled up. Never sent. Thrown in the trash. Walking out of the apartment. Not knowing where to go. Just walking. And walking. And never going back. I wrote you a letter, Pamela gasped, tears pouring down her face now. I wrote you a letter, but I never sent it. I was so depressed after my mother died. I couldn't function. And I thought if you came back and saw me like that, you'd leave anyway. So I left first. No, Robert said desperately, pulling her into his arms. No, Pamela. I would never have left. Never. I waited, she sobbed into his shoulder. I waited for as long as I could. But the grief was too much. And the apartment rent was overdue. And I couldn't think straight. So I just left. And then I couldn't find my way back. Robert held her tighter, his own tears soaking into her hair. I looked for you. I looked everywhere. For 2 years, Pamela. I never stopped looking. Pamela pulled back to look at him, really look at him, and for the first time since he'd found her on his lawn, recognition flooded her eyes. I knew you, she whispered, her voice shaking. I knew you. Robert cupped her face in his hands. You didn't just know me, Pamela. You loved me. And I loved you. I still love you. Pamela's face crumpled. She collapsed against him, her whole body racked with sobs. I waited for you, she cried. I waited for you until I lost everything. My home, my mind, my memories. Everything. Robert held her while she broke apart, while years of pain and loss and loneliness poured out of her in waves. Frances climbed into the chair beside them and wrapped her small arms around both of them. And Dr. Hernandez sat quietly, letting the truth finally surface after 7 years of being buried alive. After the doctor's appointment, Robert drove Pamela back to the bridge. She'd insisted, despite his protests, despite Frances's tears, despite Dr. Hernandez's gentle suggestion that she stay somewhere safe. I need my things, Pamela had said quietly. And I need to think. Robert understood. Her entire reality had just been shattered and rebuilt in the span of an hour. She needed time to process. So he drove her back, watched her disappear under the bridge, and then sat in his car for 20 minutes, staring at the concrete pillar where she'd vanished. Finally, he went home. But he couldn't stop thinking about her, couldn't stop seeing her face when the memories came flooding back, couldn't stop hearing her voice breaking as she said, I waited for you until I lost everything. That night, after Frances fell asleep, Robert made a decision. He needed to see it. Really see it. The place where Pamela had been surviving. So at midnight, he drove back downtown. He parked his car 2 blocks away and walked to the old train station on foot. The streets were empty except for a few figures huddled in doorways. Music thumped from a distant nightclub. Glass crunched under his shoes. When he reached the bridge, he stopped. The reality of it hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just rough or unfortunate. This was hell on earth. The area under the bridge was covered in trash, rotting food, broken bottles, used needles, human waste. The smell was overwhelming. Several makeshift tents clustered together, their occupants invisible in the darkness. A shopping cart lay on its side, wheels still spinning slowly. Someone coughed, a wet hacking sound that echoed off the concrete. And somewhere in this nightmare, Pamela had been sleeping. For years. Robert walked slowly into the shadows, his phone flashlight cutting through the darkness. He found her spot easily, the concrete pillar where he'd met her that morning. Her torn sweater was folded neatly beside a flattened cardboard box. A plastic bag held her few possessions, the water-stained book, a broken comb, a cracked mirror, a small notebook with pages falling out. He picked up the notebook and opened it. Poetry. Pages and pages of poetry, written in her familiar handwriting. I am a ghost in a world that forgot to bury me. I walk among the living, but I am not alive. I remember pieces of a life I used to have, a smile, a promise, a love I couldn't keep. If you're reading this, whoever you are, know that I was real once. Know that I mattered once. Know that I loved once, with everything I had. And when I lost him, I lost myself. And I've been looking for both of us ever since. Robert's knees buckled. He collapsed onto the cold, filthy concrete, still clutching the notebook, and broke. Not tears. Not quiet crying. A complete, total breakdown. He sobbed loud, ugly, broken sobs that tore from his chest like screams. His whole body shook. He pressed his fist against his mouth to muffle the sound, but it didn't help. This was where she'd slept. On this concrete. In this filth. In this danger. While he'd been sleeping in a king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. While he'd been eating meals prepared by private chefs. While he'd been flying first class to business meetings. She'd been here. Alone. Cold. Hungry. Forgotten. I'm sorry, he choked out to the empty darkness. I'm so sorry. I should have found you. I should have looked harder. I should have. He couldn't finish. He just knelt there on the concrete where the woman he loved had been surviving, and cried until he had nothing left. When he finally stood, his expensive suit was ruined, stained with dirt and God knows what else. He didn't care. He picked up Pamela's things, the sweater, the bag, the notebook, and walked back to his car. He sat in the driver's seat, still holding the notebook, and made a vow out loud to the empty car. You will never sleep here again, he said, his voice raw and fierce. Never. I don't care what it takes. I don't care if you fight me. I don't care if you hate me. You will never sleep on concrete again. He meant it with every fiber of his being. The next morning, Robert returned to the bridge at dawn. Pamela was already awake, sitting against the pillar with her book. She looked up when she saw him. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. You came back, she said quietly. I'll always come back, Robert replied. He sat down beside her, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Pamela broke the silence. I remember more, she whispered. Not everything, but more. Tell me. I remember writing you letters after you left. Long letters. Telling you about my day, about how much I missed you, about the things I wanted to tell you when you came home. Her voice cracked. I remember my mother getting sick. I remember the accident. I remember the funeral where I stood alone because everyone else had already said goodbye. Robert reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. I remember the depression, Pamela continued, staring at their joined hands. How it felt like drowning in slow motion. How I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think. How the bills piled up and I couldn't pay them. How the landlord changed the locks. How I walked out with just a backpack and nowhere to go. Pamela. I remember sitting on a park bench for 3 days straight because I didn't know where else to go. I remember people walking past me like I didn't exist. I remember realizing, this was my life now. This was what I'd become. Tears streamed down her face. I remember the moment I stopped hoping you'd find me. Because even if you did, what would you see? A homeless woman with matted hair and torn clothes who sleeps on concrete and eats from trash cans. She looked at him with hollow eyes. I'm not the girl you loved, Robert. That girl is gone. I'm nothing now. Robert grabbed both of her hands, forcing her to look at him. You're everything, he said fiercely. I'm broken. You're everything, he repeated, his voice shaking with emotion. You're the woman who survived when most people would have given up. You're the woman who kept reading, kept learning, kept hoping even when the world told you to disappear. You're the woman who taught my daughter kindness when you had every reason to be bitter. You're the woman who wrote poetry on concrete because you refused to let the darkness kill your soul. Pamela's lip trembled. You are not nothing, Pamela Conant. You are the strongest person I have ever known. And the fact that you survived this place, this life for years, that doesn't make you broken. That makes you a warrior. I don't feel like a warrior, she whispered. I feel like a ghost. Then let me help you feel alive again, Robert said. Please. Come home with me. Not forever. Not permanently. Just for a few days. Rest. Eat. Be safe. That's all I'm asking. Pamela looked at the concrete pillar where she'd been sleeping. Then she looked at Robert, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Someone who believed in her. Okay, she whispered. Okay. An hour later, Robert's car pulled through the gates of Westmont Estate. Pamela sat in the passenger seat, clutching her backpack, her body tense with anxiety. It's so big, she murmured, staring at the mansion. It's just a house, Robert said gently. You don't have to be afraid. But when he opened the front door and led her inside, Pamela froze. The entrance hall was massive, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, sweeping staircases. Light poured through floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything was white and gold and impossibly clean. The air smelled like fresh flowers and expensive wood polish. It was the exact opposite of the bridge. Pamela took one step inside and stopped. Her breathing quickened. Her hands started shaking. Pamela. Robert turned back, concerned. Are you okay? She wasn't. The brightness was too bright. The warmth was too warm. The safety was too overwhelming. Her mind couldn't process the contrast, from concrete and filth to marble and luxury in the span of an hour. I don't belong here, she whispered, backing toward the door. Yes, you do. No. This is too much. This is. Pamela. Frances came running down the stairs in her pajamas, blonde hair flying. You came. You really came. She crashed into Pamela, wrapping her arms around her waist. And Pamela, overwhelmed, exhausted, emotionally shattered, looked down at the little girl clinging to her, then up at Robert standing in the doorway of a life she'd thought she'd lost forever, and the world tilted sideways. Robert, she started to say. Then her eyes rolled back and her knees buckled. Robert lunged forward and caught her before she hit the marble floor, his heart hammering in panic. Pamela! Pamela! Frances screamed. Daddy, what's wrong with her? Robert lifted Pamela into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and carried her toward the stairs. Call Dr. Hernandez, he shouted to the housekeeper. Now. He laid Pamela on the bed in the guest room, brushing her tangled hair from her face. Her breathing was shallow but steady. She wasn't hurt. She just shut down. Too much. Everything had been too much. Robert sat on the edge of the bed, holding her hand, and whispered, I've got you. You're safe now. I promise. You're finally safe. Frances climbed onto the bed beside them, tears streaming down her face. Is she going to be okay? Robert looked at Pamela's pale face, her trembling eyelids, her cracked lips. Yes, he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. She's going to be okay. But as he sat there watching her sleep, one thought consumed him. She fainted from being safe. From being warm. From being loved. What kind of hell has she been living in? Pamela woke in a bed so soft she thought she was dreaming. White sheets. Thick comforter. Pillows that didn't smell like mildew and despair. Sunlight streaming through gauze curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The mansion, the overwhelming brightness, Frances's arms around her, the world tilting sideways. She sat up quickly, heart racing. The room was beautiful, cream walls, fresh flowers on the dresser, a door that led to what looked like a private bathroom. A bathroom. With a shower. And a toilet that flushed. Pamela's throat tightened. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," she said quietly. The door opened and Frances peeked her head in, her face lighting up when she saw Pamela awake. "You're up." She rushed over and climbed onto the bed. "You slept for 14 hours. Daddy said you needed rest. Are you hungry?" Cook made pancakes. "Do you like pancakes?" "I love pancakes. Especially with chocolate chips." Pamela couldn't help but smile at the flood of words. Yes. I like pancakes." "Good." Frances grabbed her hand. "Come on. I'll show you the kitchen." "Frances, wait. I need to clean up first." Frances looked at her seriously. "Daddy said you can use the shower. There are towels and soap and everything. And..." She hopped off the bed and opened the closet. "He got you clothes. Real clothes. Not fancy ones. Just comfortable ones." Pamela stared at the closet filled with soft sweaters, jeans, comfortable shoes. Her eyes filled with tears. "Hey, don't cry," Frances said, hugging her. "You're safe now. Daddy promised." An hour later, Pamela walked downstairs wearing clean jeans and a pale blue sweater. Her hair was still damp from the shower, the first real shower she'd had in years. She'd stood under the hot water for 20 minutes, watching dirt and grime swirl down the drain, crying and not sure if it was from relief or shame. Robert was waiting in the kitchen, coffee in hand. When he saw her, he smiled. "You look better," he said gently. "I feel strange," Pamela admitted. "Like I'm wearing someone else's life." "You're wearing your own life. The life you should have had all along." Frances tugged Pamela toward the table. "Sit with me. I want to show you my new book." And just like that, the awkwardness melted. Frances chattered away about her reading, about the new chapter she'd finished, about the big words she'd learned. Pamela listened, encouraged her, helped her sound out difficult passages. Robert watched from the doorway, coffee forgotten in his hand. This was what he'd been missing. What Frances had been missing. Not just help with reading, but presence. Attention. Someone who genuinely cared. The days began to blur together in the best possible way. Every morning, Frances would wake up and run straight to Pamela's room. They'd have breakfast together, then sit in the sunroom while Pamela helped her with lessons. Not just reading, everything. Math, science, writing, drawing. But more than academics, Pamela taught Frances something deeper. Confidence. You got it wrong? That's okay. Try again. You don't know the answer? Let's figure it out together. You're frustrated? Take a breath. You can do this. Robert noticed the change immediately. Frances stopped crying over homework. She stopped saying I'm stupid or I can't. She started raising her hand during virtual lessons. She started asking questions without fear. And the change wasn't just academic. Frances laughed more. Played more. Seemed lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from her small shoulders. One afternoon, Robert found them in the garden. Pamela was reading while Frances drew pictures in a sketchbook. Neither was talking, but there was a peacefulness between them, a quiet comfort that spoke louder than words. Robert's chest tightened with emotion. This was what he'd wanted for Frances. Someone who made her feel safe. Someone who made her feel seen. And Pamela, despite everything she'd been through, despite her own brokenness, was giving Frances exactly what she needed. But not everyone was happy about the arrangement. 2 weeks after Pamela moved in, Robert overheard a conversation in the kitchen. "I don't understand why she's here," the head housekeeper Margaret said to one of the maids. She was homeless. Who knows what kind of diseases she might have brought into this house. And she sits at the table with Mr. Traylor like she's family, the maid added. It's not proper. It's not safe, Margaret said firmly. That little girl shouldn't be getting attached to someone like that. Robert was about to step in when he heard another voice. Someone like what? Frances stood in the doorway, her hands balled into fists, her face red with anger. Margaret straightened. Miss Frances, I didn't see you there. You're talking about Pamela, Frances said, her voice shaking. You're saying mean things about her. We're just concerned. No, you're being mean. She's not dangerous. She's not dirty. She's kind and smart, and she makes me feel like I matter. Which is more than you do. Frances. Margaret looked shocked. Pamela is family, Frances said, her voice rising. She's more family than you'll ever be. And if you don't like it, you can leave. Margaret's mouth fell open. The maid looked mortified. Robert stepped into the room. Frances is right. Everyone turned to look at him. Pamela is family, Robert said firmly, looking directly at Margaret. And anyone who has a problem with that can hand in their notice. Effective immediately. Margaret paled. Mr. Traylor, I didn't mean. You did mean it. And you're wrong. Robert put his hand on Frances's shoulder. Pamela stays. End of discussion. Frances wrapped her arms around his waist, and for the first time in weeks, Robert felt like he'd done something right as a father. That evening, after Frances went to bed, Robert found Pamela sitting on the terrace, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. You heard? He asked, sitting beside her. Frances told me. She was very proud of herself. Robert smiled. She should be. She defended you like a warrior. She shouldn't have to defend me, Pamela said quietly. They're right. I don't belong here. Stop saying that. It's true. I'm a homeless woman living in a billionaire's mansion. This isn't real life, Robert. This is a fantasy. And eventually it's going to end. It doesn't have to. Pamela looked at him, and in the moonlight, Robert saw fear in her eyes. I'm remembering more, she whispered. Every day, more pieces come back. That's good. Is it? Her voice cracked. Because I remember our last night together. I remember standing on my apartment steps, watching you drive away. I remember promising I'd wait for you. Robert reached for her hand. She let him take it. I remember the letter from the hospital saying my mother was gone. I remember the funeral where I stood alone. I remember the weeks after where I couldn't get out of bed. I remember the eviction notice. I remember the moment I realized I had nowhere to go. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I remember sitting on that park bench, hungry and cold and so tired I wanted to die. I remember thinking, where is he? Where's Robert? He promised he'd come back. And then I remember the moment I realized you weren't coming. That no one was coming. That I was completely, utterly alone. Robert squeezed her hand tighter, his own eyes filling with tears. I was coming back, he said desperately. I came back with a ring, Pamela. I came back to marry you. But I was already gone. And by the time you were looking for me, I'd already disappeared into the streets. I'd already become invisible. She looked at him with devastated eyes. And now I'm here in this beautiful house, with this beautiful life, and I'm terrified. Of what? Of healing, she whispered. What if I can't, Robert? What if I'm too broken? What if I start to remember everything, and it destroys me all over again? What if I get better, and then I lose it all again? What if? Robert pulled her into his arms, cutting off the spiral of fear. You won't, he said fiercely. Because I won't let you. Neither will Frances. You're not alone anymore, Pamela. You're not facing this alone. Pamela clung to him, her body shaking with silent sobs. I'm so scared, she whispered into his shoulder. I'm so scared, Robert. I know, he said, holding her tighter. I know. But you don't have to be brave alone anymore. Let me be brave for both of us until you remember how. And there, under the stars on the terrace of a mansion that had always felt empty until she arrived, Pamela let herself be held. Let herself be comforted. Let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, healing was possible. Even for someone as broken as her. 3 weeks into therapy, Dr. Hernandez suggested something new. I think you're ready, she said gently during one of Pamela's sessions. Ready to unlock the full memory. Not just fragments. Everything. Pamela sat in the comfortable leather chair, her hands twisted in her lap. Robert sat beside her. He came to every session now, silent support whenever she needed him. What if I don't want to remember everything? Pamela asked quietly. Then we stop, Dr. Hernandez said. But Pamela, these memories are already there. They're affecting you whether you acknowledge them or not. The nightmares, the panic attacks, the fear of being alone, they're all connected to trauma you haven't fully processed. Pamela looked at Robert. He nodded encouragingly. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. Dr. Hernandez dimmed the lights and guided Pamela through a deep relaxation exercise. Then, slowly, carefully, she began asking questions, walking Pamela backward through time, through the years of homelessness, through the confusion and survival, all the way back to the beginning. Tell me about your mother, Dr. Hernandez said softly. And the floodgates opened. The memory came sharp and clear, like watching a movie she'd forgotten she starred in. March 15th. 7 years ago. Pamela standing in a hospital corridor, a doctor's hand on her shoulder. I'm so sorry, Ms. Conant. We did everything we could. The injuries from the accident were too severe. She didn't suffer. Pamela, numb, nodding. Not crying. Not yet. Just empty. Her mother. The woman who'd raised her alone. The woman who'd worked 3 jobs to send her to college. The woman who'd hugged her the morning Robert left and said, he'll come back. Good men always do. Gone. Just gone. Pamela's breathing quickened in the therapy chair. Robert reached for her hand. She gripped it like a lifeline. Keep going, Dr. Hernandez said gently. What happened next? The funeral. Small. Quiet. Pamela standing alone at the grave because her mother's family had disowned them years ago. Friends from her mother's work came, said nice things, left. Everyone left. And Pamela went back to her small apartment, the one Robert had helped her find before he left for London, and stood in the middle of the empty living room. No mother. No Robert. Just her. And silence so loud it screamed. That's when the depression started. Not sadness. Sadness would have been manageable. This was something else entirely. A black hole that swallowed everything. Joy, hope, hunger, reason. She stopped going to classes. Stopped answering her phone. Stopped eating, except when her body forced her to. She'd lie in bed for days, staring at the ceiling, unable to move. Unable to think. Unable to do anything except count the days until Robert came home. 8 weeks left. 7 weeks. 6. Hold on, she'd whisper to herself. Just hold on until he gets back. But holding on got harder every day. Pamela was crying now, tears streaming silently down her face. Dr. Hernandez handed her tissues. You're doing so well, the doctor said. Keep going. What happened when the depression got worse? The bills came. Rent. Utilities. Student loans. Medical bills from her mother's accident that insurance wouldn't cover. Pamela stared at the numbers. Numbers that didn't make sense. Numbers she couldn't pay. She tried to work, got a job at a coffee shop, but she'd break down crying in the middle of shifts. They let her go after a week. She tried to call Robert, but his number went straight to voicemail. He was overseas, busy with the internship that would launch his career. She didn't want to burden him with her falling apart. So she wrote letters instead. Long, desperate letters she never sent. Dear Robert, I'm drowning. Come home. Dear Robert, I can't breathe without you here. Dear Robert, I'm scared I'm losing my mind. She threw them all away. For weeks until he came back. 3 weeks. 2. The eviction notice came with 1 week left. Pamela stood in her apartment, staring at the paper, and something inside her snapped. He'll be back in a week, she told herself. You can make it 1 more week. But then a thought, dark, poisonous, crushing, crept in. What if he sees me like this and leaves? What if he comes back and realizes I'm broken? What if I ruin everything by being weak? What if he deserves better than a girlfriend who can't even function without her mother? Pamela gasped in the therapy chair, her whole body trembling. That's it, she choked out. That's when I decided to leave. Why? Dr. Hernandez asked gently. Because I thought. Pamela's voice broke. I thought he'd be better off without me. The memory continued, relentless now. Pamela packing a backpack, just the essentials. Clothes. Toothbrush. The book Robert had given her for her birthday. Walking out of the apartment at 3 a.m. Not looking back. Sitting on a park bench as the sun came up, telling herself this was temporary. She'd get help. She'd find a shelter. She'd pull herself together and then she'd find Robert and explain. But she never did. Days turned into weeks. The shelters were full or dangerous. She slept in parks, under bridges, in doorways. She ate from trash cans when hunger became unbearable. She told herself she'd get help tomorrow. Always tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. And slowly, so slowly she didn't notice it happening, her mind started to fracture. The depression became something darker. PTSD from her mother's death. Trauma from the streets. Dissociation that made whole days disappear. She forgot her phone number. Then her address. Then her last name. Eventually, she forgot why she'd left in the first place. She forgot she'd ever had a home. She forgot she'd ever had a mother. And worst of all, she forgot Robert. His face became a blur. His voice became an echo. His promises became fairy tales she'd once believed in. Years passed. She survived. Barely. But the brilliant college student with teaching dreams and poetry in her heart disappeared entirely. And Pamela Conant became just another homeless woman the world stopped seeing. In the therapy office, Pamela opened her eyes. She was shaking violently, tears pouring down her face, her breathing ragged. I left, she sobbed. I left him. I walked away because I thought he'd be better off without me. Robert pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against his chest, screaming, actually screaming, with a pain that had been buried for 7 years. I thought you'd be better off without me, she cried into his shirt. I was broken and depressed, and I couldn't think straight, and I thought if you came back and saw me like that, you'd leave anyway. So I left first. I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was doing the right thing. Robert's own tears soaked into her hair. His whole body shook as he held her. I needed you, he choked out. I needed you so much, Pamela. Do you understand that? You weren't a burden. You were everything. You were my whole world. I'm sorry, Pamela sobbed. I'm so sorry. I ruined everything. I ruined us. No, Robert said fiercely, pulling back to look at her tear-streaked face. The trauma ruined us. The depression ruined us. The horrible timing of everything ruined us. But you? You were just trying to survive. And his voice broke completely. I should have been there. I should have stayed. I should have called more. I should have felt that something was wrong. I should have. You didn't know, Pamela whispered. I should have known, Robert said, crying harder than Pamela had ever seen anyone cry. You were falling apart, and I was on another continent chasing a career. What kind of man does that? What kind of man leaves the woman he loves when she's grieving? You didn't know she would die. Neither of us did. But I knew she was sick. And I still left. Robert buried his face in his hands. I've lived with that guilt every day for 7 years. The guilt of leaving you. The guilt of not finding you. The guilt of moving on with my life while you were sleeping on concrete. Dr. Hernandez quietly handed them both tissues. I searched for you, Robert continued, his voice raw. For 2 years, Pamela. I hired investigators. I called every hospital, every shelter, every police station. I drove through every neighborhood. I showed your picture to thousands of people. And when I couldn't find you, when everyone told me to give up, I still couldn't. Because somewhere inside, I knew you were out there. I knew you were alive. I just didn't know where. Pamela cupped his face in her hands, both of them crying so hard they could barely breathe. I'm sorry I gave up, she whispered. I'm sorry I stopped fighting. I'm sorry I forgot you. I never stopped fighting, Robert said. And I never forgot you. Not for a single day. They held each other in that therapy office, 7 years of pain and loss and regret pouring out in waves. Dr. Hernandez sat quietly, letting them grieve the life they'd lost and the years they'd never get back. Finally, when the tears slowed, Robert pulled back and looked at Pamela with red, swollen eyes. Pamela, he said, his voice hoarse but steady. Come home. She blinked, confused. I'm already at your house. No, Robert said, shaking his head. I mean really come home. Not as a guest. Not as someone we're helping. As family. As someone who belongs there. As. He took a shaky breath. As the woman I love. Because I never stopped loving you, Pamela. Not for a second. Not even when I thought you were gone forever. Pamela stared at him, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Robert. You don't have to say anything right now, he said quickly. I know you're still healing. I know you're still putting the pieces back together. But I need you to know, you have a home. You have a family. You have Francis, who adores you. And you have me, who has been waiting 7 years for you to come back. Pamela's hands trembled as she reached for his. What if I'm too broken? She whispered. What if I can never be the girl you remember? Robert smiled through his tears. Then I'll love the woman you are now. The survivor. The fighter. The one who teaches my daughter kindness even though the world showed you none. I'll love whoever you become, Pamela. Because I never stopped loving who you were. And there, in that therapy office, with 7 years of pain finally exposed to the light, Pamela allowed herself to hope. Okay, she whispered. I'll come home. 6 weeks. That's how long Pamela spent in the intensive therapy program Dr. Hernandez recommended. 6 weeks in a private facility where she could focus entirely on healing, on processing the trauma, on rebuilding the neural pathways her mind had fractured, on learning to live without the constant fear that had kept her surviving but never truly alive. Robert visited every day. He brought books, fresh flowers, and updates about Francis. He never pushed. Never demanded. Just showed up. Proved that this time, he wasn't going anywhere. Frances video called every night, her face filling the screen with stories about school, about the books she was reading, about how much she missed her best friend. When are you coming home? Frances would ask every time. And every time, Pamela would smile and say, soon, sweetheart. Soon. But she was terrified. Because what if she wasn't ready? What if she came back and the panic returned? What if she walked into that mansion and felt like an imposter again? What if she let them down? Dr. Hernandez had been patient with her fears. Healing isn't linear, Pamela. You're going to have good days and bad days. Days where you feel strong and days where you feel broken. That's normal. That's being human. But what if the bad days are too much for them? Then you communicate. You ask for help. You let them love you even when you don't feel lovable. Dr. Hernandez had looked at her seriously. You spent 7 years alone, believing you had to carry everything by yourself. That ends now. You have people who want to carry it with you. Let them. So when Dr. Hernandez finally said, "You're ready to go home," Pamela had packed her small bag with trembling hands. Home. She had a home now. Robert picked her up on a crisp November morning. The trees were golden and red, the air sharp and clean. Pamela stepped out of the facility wearing jeans, a soft cream sweater, and boots, real boots, not the torn sneakers held together with duct tape. Her hair was clean and trimmed. Her face had color in it again. She'd gained weight, healthy weight that made her look less like a ghost and more like a person. But her hands still shook as she climbed into Robert's car. "Nervous?" he asked gently. "Terrified," she admitted. Robert reached over and squeezed her hand. "Frances has been counting down the days. She made you a welcome home banner. It's glittery. Very glittery. I found glitter in my coffee this morning." Pamela laughed, a real laugh, one that came from somewhere deep and genuine. That sounds like her. They drove in comfortable silence for a while. Then Pamela spoke. "Robert. Yeah. Thank you. For not giving up on me." He glanced at her, his eyes shining. "I could never give up on you, Pamela. Not in this lifetime or any other." When they pulled through the gates of Westmont Estate, Pamela's breath caught. The mansion looked different somehow. Less intimidating. More like home. Robert parked the car, but before he could get out, the front door burst open. Frances came running, blonde hair flying, face lit up with pure joy, screaming at the top of her lungs. "Pamela! Pamela, you're back!" Pamela barely had time to open the car door before Frances launched herself into her arms, nearly knocking her over. "You came back!" Frances cried, her small arms wrapped around Pamela's neck in a death grip. "I missed you so much. I have so many things to show you. I finished 3-chapter books by myself. And I wrote a story about a princess who was sad but then found her family again, and it's definitely not about you, but also it's totally about you." Pamela laughed through tears, holding Frances tight. "I missed you too, sweetheart. So much. Don't leave again, okay? Promise me you won't leave." Pamela pulled back to look at Frances's earnest face. "I promise. I'm not going anywhere." Frances beamed and grabbed her hand. "Come on. I have to show you my banner. And your room. Daddy let me help decorate it. There are flowers and books and everything." But before Frances could drag her inside, Pamela stopped. Robert stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, watching them with an expression Pamela couldn't quite name. Hope. Fear. Love. All of it. "Give us a minute, Frances," Robert said softly. Frances looked between them, then smiled knowingly, far too knowing for a 7-year-old. "Okay. But don't take too long. Cook made your favorite cookies, Pamela. Chocolate chip." She skipped into the house, leaving Robert and Pamela standing in the driveway. The autumn wind rustled the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a bird sang. The world kept moving, but in that moment, everything felt still. Robert stepped closer. "I lost you once," he said, his voice rough with emotion. 7 years ago, I lost you because I wasn't paying attention. Because I chose ambition over presence. Because I thought I had time." He took another step. "And then I spent 7 years drowning in regret, wondering if you were alive, wondering if you were safe, wondering if you thought about me the way I thought about you every single day." Pamela's eyes filled with tears. "And then I found you," Robert continued, his own tears falling freely now. "Against all odds, in the most impossible way, you came back into my life. And I almost lost you again because you didn't remember me. Because the world had beaten you down so much you forgot what it felt like to be loved." "Robert. I won't lose you again, Pamela." He reached for her hands, holding them like they were the most precious things in the world. "I won't lose you to the streets. I won't lose you to fear. I won't lose you to the belief that you don't deserve happiness. Stay. Stay with us. Not as a guest. Not as someone we're helping. As family. As..." He paused, searching her face. "As the woman I love," he finished softly. "Because I do love you, Pamela. I loved the girl you were in college. I loved the memory of you I carried for 7 years. And I love the woman you are now, the survivor, the fighter, the one who teaches my daughter that broken things can be beautiful." Pamela trembled, tears streaming down her face. What if I break again? Then I'll help you put the pieces back together. What if I have nightmares? Then I'll sit with you until morning. What if I'm not enough? Robert pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. You've always been enough, Pamela. More than enough. You're everything. Pamela buried her face in his chest and let herself cry, not from pain this time, but from relief. From hope. From the overwhelming realization that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found her way home. Okay, she whispered against his heart. Okay, I'll stay. Robert pulled back just enough to see her face. Yeah. She nodded, smiling through tears. Yeah. I'll stay. With you. With Francis. With family. Forever. Pamela remembered that night 7 years ago when he'd asked her the same question in a library at 2 a.m. When she'd promised forever and meant it with every fiber of her being. Forever, she whispered. And Robert kissed her, soft and gentle and full of 7 years of longing, while the autumn leaves fell around them like blessings. Francis's voice rang out from the front door. Are you guys done being romantic? Because the cookies are getting cold. They broke apart, laughing. We're coming. Pamela called back. Robert laced his fingers through hers, and together, they walked toward the house. Toward Francis, waiting with her glittery banner. Toward a life that had almost been destroyed but somehow, miraculously, found its way back.
Sometimes love doesn't die. It gets buried under pain, under trauma, under years of survival and fear and forgetting. It gets covered by concrete and cold nights, and the cruelty of a world that stops seeing you. But it doesn't die. It waits. It waits for a little girl crying over a book she can't read. It waits for a moment of kindness in a park beneath an oak tree. It waits for someone to say, "May I help?" It waits for recognition to flicker in eyes that forgot how to hope. It waits for the moment when two broken people realize that together, they might just be whole. Pamela Conant spent 7 years lost in darkness, believing she'd never find her way back to the light. But she did, not because someone rescued her, but because someone remembered her. Someone saw her. Someone refused to let her disappear. And Robert Traylor, the billionaire who could buy anything, learned that the only thing worth having, the only thing that truly mattered, couldn't be purchased. It could only be cherished, protected, and loved. 3 months later, on a snowy December evening, Robert knelt in the same spot on the lawn where he'd first seen Pamela teaching Francis. He pulled out a small velvet box, the same one he'd bought 7 years ago, and asked the question he should have asked long before. Pamela said yes. Francis screamed with joy so loud the neighbors 3 houses down heard it. And in the spring, in a garden filled with flowers and hope and second chances, they became a family. Not by blood, but by choice. By survival. By love that refused to die. Final message. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible, forgotten, or broken beyond repair, hear this. You matter. Your story isn't over. The darkness you're in right now isn't forever. Sometimes healing takes time. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes meeting the right person at the right moment who sees you when the rest of the world looks away. Don't give up. Don't stop hoping. Don't believe the lie that you're too broken to be loved. Because somewhere out there, someone is looking for you. Someone is waiting for you. Someone sees your worth even when you can't see it yourself. Hold on. Your forever is coming. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Mr. Crown Stories and hit the notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And in the comments, tell me, do you believe in second chances? Because I do. And I'm proof that sometimes love finds its way home. Until next time, remember, you are seen. You are valued. You are loved.